This is Bedside, a podcast series on a mission to debunk sex. I'm your host, Tatiana, and each week we uncover stories, ideas, and expert information to help guide you on your ever-evolving journey of deep love, relationships, and good sex. Oh, and a little bit of manifestation sprinkled in there too. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bedside podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. Happy Wednesday. And to anybody tuning into YouTube, welcome to my living room. I'm trying to do a better job of uploading episodes to YouTube as well, just because I know so many of you have requested just having more of the visual added effect to listening. I have to say, I do so many of my interviews in studio, and I haven't always uploaded the video component, even though I have it, which is so wild to even say. I've just used the clips for socials. But anyways, I'm trying to do a way better job of just getting on YouTube, making it no big deal. So if you are listening, feel free to head over to YouTube. You can watch it there or chill on your podcast platform, whatever works for you. But I'm so excited to be chatting with you guys today. Thank you for bearing with me the past 2 weeks. We have not uploaded a podcast episode, truthfully, because I have been waiting to record this one in hopes of gearing up for our summer season finale. So we're kicking it off. This is part 1 of 3 before we take our summer break. And this is the Master Manifestation series. And it is in tandem with, drum roll please, the monthly manifestation journal that is finally out and launched and alive in the world. I have been doing my best not to be chatting up a storm about it on the podcast, but if you're specifically following at the Bedside on social media, I've been teasing this for forever, and I'm so excited to really get into this and also just share about the manifestation process that I feel like I've kind of landed upon. So whether or not you buy this journal, no worries. I just feel like this is knowledge that I'm so excited to impart on you guys, because I have really geared up for this for close to a year. And it really, and I'll get into the story of kind of how I channeled really this journal, and I'll definitely share more details on that. But it's just so crazy how this has come to fruition. And it's so beautiful, which you'll hear more in this episode today, how I've so trusted the timing of it and really allowed myself not to rush this process, even just this launch process, to share this with you guys. As you'll hear in my explanation today, you'll understand how I was able to literally create this process using this process. I know that sounds a little maybe confusing, but if you're following me, it's just so real how helpful it's become to really create a process that works for us and not in a way that feels like it isn't and it's maybe working against us. So all that to say, this is the Master Manifestation series. I'm so excited to be doing this with you guys. It is a 3-part series. So this is part 1 today. And yeah. Also, I wanted to give just a little sprinkle for you guys, because I always say podcast listeners get the tea first. You guys always get the first exclusive to anything. So technically, these journals are launching tomorrow on the 6th. But for our sweet, fun, amazing listeners, being you, they're out now. They're live. And I want you guys to get your hands on these first, because I have a feeling when I launch this on TikTok Shop that we might sell through our entire inventory. I'm not even kidding. I just have this crazy wild feeling about it. So it's not launching on TikTok Shop just quite yet. I wanted to make sure that you guys got first priority. And you always will. This is how I run things. You guys are the core and crux of the Bedside community. I wouldn't be here and doing any of this without you. So head over to thebedside.co and you can shop. We just updated our entire website, which is so wild, and our entire shopping experience. So go over there if you want to get your hands on it. Also, anyone watching me on YouTube, I am going to be glancing on my phone because I normally don't outline my episodes, but today I was this needs a bit of an outline and a framework, because There's so much to get into. So today's episode is all about step 1 of the monthly manifestation process, which is visualization. There are 3 parts we're going to be covering in this series: visualization, aligning, and attracting. So visualize, align, attract is really what this method is all about. And I want to share with you, first and foremost, like, how did I even get to this? So let's start at square one. About a year and a half ago, I interviewed an amazing guest on the podcast, Sam Doyle, who came on. I'll link the episode if you haven't listened to it already, where we chatted all about cycle syncing and really what it means to step into yourself every single month and really embody all the different phases of your menstrual cycle. And it was the first time I was introduced to this theory of the Infradian System. Put a pin in that because we are going to be coming back to that. It is actually a system that Alisa Vitti, who, little teaser, we're having her on the podcast right when the podcast picks back up at the end of the summer. So stay tuned. She is the inventor of the cycle syncing method, you guys, and of the really like figuring out this Infradian system that we operate by. But I had Sam on the podcast, and she introduced me to this idea of really how her and her friend do this thing at the top of every month where they ask themselves, like, who is my archetype this month? Who am I stepping into for the month, like upcoming with my period, and like really just embodying the cyclical nature that all of us menstruators have. And I was like, that is such a cool thing. I am going to take this concept and apply it to my life. And so I started just loosely creating just an archetype to attach myself to at the top of every month. And I was really, really playing with this concept. And what I decided to do was attach it really to my journaling process, to the way that I created vision boards on Pinterest. And I ended up kind of developing this entire system around how I embodied myself every single month for my manifestations. Now, stay with me for a second because we're going to break this down a little further. But from that, I ended up developing, because I'm a systems girl through and through. I love having a good digital system. I used the free task manager called Notion to actually end up creating a template around really this entire archetypal process, going down to your manifestations, going down to your pleasure practices, all of these really amazing things that I was kind of scribbling down in my journal, doing haphazardly and very scrappily. And I ended up making a little bit of a templatized system for this on Notion. Now, I uploaded this, and I'll link a podcast episode if you're just like curious a little bit more about this Notion system. I'm going to link a series that we released previously that goes into this entire process for anybody who wants the template / is just like interested in what it all is. But essentially, over 700 of you downloaded this template. 700 of you downloaded this template. I had friends, one of my friends told me that she sent it to another friend of hers and was like, listen, I use this. It's changed my life completely. If you don't use it, like, she was making some jokes. She basically was like, I mean, you don't have to manifest everything in your life if you don't want to. Like, okay. She was being like sassy to her friend about it, basically being like, this has changed my entire life in the best way possible. So from this template, I just felt like I was really onto something. I was like, wow, I have taken this like system that I've created for myself, that I do in my journal, that I was so beautifully inspired by my friend Sam about how she creates a word at the top of every month. I kind of took that, like ran with it, gave it like bones, right? And then I had this wild moment where I was really just spending a lot of last summer just so getting to know myself on a really deep level. And I would spend this time on the weekends in a park nearby me, and I would sit under this tree, and I would just like, literally, I would spend like Saturday or Sunday afternoons. I'd bring like a big picnic blanket. I'd bring my journal, like a great book I was reading. Sometimes I would just like lie in the grass and listen to meditation music, but I was just like very into really just like grounding and finding nature and being with myself and giving myself that like deep restorative active rest, if you will, just because I feel like all of us deserve really a level of rest like that. I'm someone who, like I'm a busy gal. I'm doing a bunch of fun, great, exciting things. And I realize just as much as I am in that energy, I really, really require time to rest and reset. So in the summer and fall, before the weather shifted, really, I was spending a lot of time in this park. And I was like really deepening my spirituality and my connection to just source and universe and my guides. And I was leaving the park one afternoon and it was a gorgeous day, windows down, like listening to probably some sort of like amazing like binaural beats or something. And I just had this total hit where I was like, I need to make this into a journal. I need to develop a process for manifesting that is beyond really this hyper specific digital system Notion template. Like, wow, blessed that over 700 people downloaded this, that it's working for people. But I wanted something that felt a little bit more pen to paper, a little bit more prompted, something easy to use, something that really debunked this entire idea of manifesting. And so I pulled out my notes app or my voice memo app, and I just recorded this voice memo that basically channeled the entire book. And what's so beautiful is I actually hadn't listened to it until the other day. And I re-listened to this note and I was like, this is so crazy to be listening to this and like physically holding this book and being like, oh, that happened. So I was actually editing it down a little bit. I made like a copy of it and I am going to hope to share like some little tidbits of that clip, maybe on like a fun TikTok or Reels for like an in the making story. But anyways, that was really how this book just like channeled through me. It took my process and said, simplify, simplify. Like, how can we give this to people? How can we gift this to people? How can we allow people to manifest in an actual way that works for them? And this is really where I want to like kind of explain the problem solution for you. So I feel like manifestation is such a big, lofty word. A lot of people are like, isn't this goal setting? I'm like, yeah, it is. Manifesting is goal setting. It's also leaning into having goals, dreams, and aspirations and letting the how not always be so granular, like not always needing an exact line item list of how something is going to pan out. A manifestation is this balance of doing and being. And I find that there are a lot of manifestation toolkits or thought leaders that really talk a lot about this process, but something, and there have been times where I've been very invested in kind of like other people's processes around manifestation, but the biggest kind of glaring thing that I found to be almost like a flaw in so much of the teachings around manifestation was that you had to do the deep work, the therapy, the going into your subconscious, going into all of your shadows in order to be deserving of manifesting. And I found that to be such a heavy conditionality to really our desires. And listen, I'm not here poo-pooing therapy, shadow work, all of that sort of stuff. In fact, it's been so beneficial to me at different points in my life, but it is not a condition for being able to call in your desires. And I think that is really where I constantly see people tripping up. I constantly see people just being like, kind of in this forever, I need to heal process, when that is in fact not what manifestation is all about. And so this kind of gets me into really the intuition and desire cycle that I discovered. And it's pretty simple, but essentially I was like, okay, well, why do we feel like we constantly need to be doing deep work around our desires? Why do we feel like there's this innate non-deservingness around it? And I was like, well, the answer is quite simple. We've been conditioned out of it. And this is very much where my work in the sexuality space, in the intimacy space, in the pleasure space has come in handy, because I've just so innately realized how much, and all of the work that we've like, and the conversations that we've had around Bedside are really just like this untangling of this conditioning of this system that we live in this society that we live in that is constantly telling us that we are undeserving, that constantly is telling us that we need to self-improve, that is constantly telling us that if we want something, we have to do it one prescriptive way. And that is just not true. And I felt that this was also really like closing in on the manifestation space. I was like, this is exactly it, where we feel, whether it's sexual, whether it's not, that our desires are not valid. Crazy, crazy. But I don't blame us because I have been here before too. And desire is so linked to our intuition. Why is that? Because when we are tapped into our intuition, we are tapped into our inner knowing system. We are so clear on our likes and dislikes. And listen, I've not always been like this either. I am someone who, for years, was a people pleaser. For years, honestly, had certain friendships and people in my life who were making decisions for me all the time. And it wasn't because I was like, oh, I can't make decisions for myself. It was because I didn't trust innately my own intuition. And it was a muscle that I had to retrain and truthfully reclaim. So intuition comes to us so naturally, so organically. Think of kids, like they're running around. They're like, I like this. I don't like this. They're so in their freedom. And as we grow up and as we're conditioned, a lot of us lose kind of this connection to our intuition, this connection to our inner knowing system. And so what is required of us is to, in our adult brains and in our adult consciousness, really say, listen, I am here to reclaim that. And I think there's this entire reclamation process that each and every one of us goes through. You know, some people go through it earlier than others. Some people, it's a lesson later in life. But regardless, it's so important to learn how to reconnect to our intuition because that is so intrinsically linked to our desires, to our wantings. And so the way that one gets into, right, this practice of their desire is, and listen, I have empathy for really feeling like you don't know where to begin, right? And feeling like, okay, wow, I suddenly have this awareness that maybe I haven't been following my intuition. Maybe it's gone a little bit dark. Maybe I've lost that muscle. And so the way that we get back into this is actually so simple. And it doesn't always need to be going to therapy and doing the deep work. Though I do highly recommend, if you do feel the calling to do so, hell yeah, more power to you. But the best way to get back into the energetic of desire is through play. And that is really where the pleasure practice comes in. And I've been talking about the pleasure practice on Bedside since like 2019, you guys. And it's really this simple idea of what is one thing that I can do for myself today? Simple, point fucking blank. Like that is what I ask myself every single day. It is like a muscle that is trained within me. It's something that is built into this monthly manifestation journal. So in your daily pages where you are constantly asking yourself, what's one thing I can do for myself today? What are the pleasure practices that I can do for myself today in the name of play, in the name of ease, in the name of rest, in the name of joy, whatever it might be? How can I build something into my day that works for me and allows me to just follow my intuition, right? It can be something as simple as, and I know it sounds so bare bones, but I'm telling you, when you get into the practice of this, you get into the practice of your desires. And this is when it starts small, but you'll witness it almost go up like a hockey stick, right? Like think of like a chart over time, like it's slowly growing and then all of a sudden it shoots up like off the grid, is when you're like, oh, this isn't just about like me taking 5 minutes between my meetings. This is because I've now learned to gift myself these things. So from that, my potential for pleasure has grown exponentially. My desire for that big, crazy thing I'm thinking about actually seems freaking possible, right? Because there's so much of the desire cycle that seems as though it feels out of reach, or you know what, that's for other people, not for me. And so we need to retrain that thinking by getting back into the daily practices of what desire looks like, because from that allows the major, major growth of it all. So there's a little tidbit on that really, where I felt like the problem was that we were putting so much emphasis on the wrong part. Or maybe just, I don't want to say the wrong part because I don't want to say doing deep, intentional work and shadow work is a bad thing. I just think we've put so much emphasis on it. Like the pendulum is so swung one way. Like it's so funny. This is just such a side note, but it might be something that you need to hear. So I'm going to say it. Recently, I was listening to, I can't remember, it might have been Mel Robbins. I love her. But it was a thought leader who basically was like, listen, good for you for doing all your therapy. When are you going to let yourself be healed? I remember it. This was also another line. It was a psychologist saying, listen, you can go into therapy. We can talk about how your parents fucked you up. Everyone's parents fucked them up in some way or shape or another. But when are you going to let that go and take accountability for your life? Like, I just want to be so for real with you. Like, I get it. It's so important. I've been there. I've done that. I've gone through kind of like the process of it. But when are you going to let that shit go and take accountability for your life? Like, that is what this process is about. And I don't mean to be like a hard ass, but I feel like we're overemphasizing the over pathologizing. Wrong freaking word for that too. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we're overdoing it. I was also hanging out with a friend the other week and they were explaining this hysterical dating story of this and was like reading this like conversation back and forth. And one girl in the group who was listening to the story just was like, you know, it sounds like the person you're talking to has gone to too much therapy. And we were all like cracking up about it because we were just like, yeah, there is a point where it's just like, it's a little too much. Like, let's get back into living. And that is what the pleasure practice is about because it gets you back into living and being innately worthy of your desires because you are. So anyways, that's me standing a little bit on my soapbox. Sorry to be a little bit controversial here, but I want us to really lean into the idea of play. And I want us to reclaim it because it's not that serious. Like, I think that's really the point I'm trying to get at is manifesting isn't that serious. It's actually a really simple process. And when you can get into the process of visualizing, aligning, and attracting to your desires is when your world is just going to unfold for you in the most magical way. So another thing that I wanted to talk about was this idea of the Infradian System. So this is another reason and another problem, I suppose, that I saw in a little bit in the self-help daily planner space where I felt as though we were still operating by this 24-hour, like, go, 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 do at all costs system. And I really wanted to lean into more of this idea of the Infradian System, which is the 28-day cycle, which is the monthly system for manifesting. And why a month? So I found myself really in this place when I was doing my top of the year goal setting, when I was creating, to-do lists for every day, that I found myself really hitting burnout quick. I know so many of us can relate to this because our system is really built around execution, and there's a lot of pressure around it. And I kind of kept asking myself, what's wrong with me? I kept being like, why am I constantly having to reset? Why am I constantly having to kind of start anew again? I'd have a couple weeks where things would be going well. And then all of a sudden I'd just be like, wow, the system that I set up for myself or that's been set up for me here feels almost like an impossible task at hand. And I'm an energetic gal. I was just like feeling so depleted and I kept hitting burnout. And I think I got sick of it. I think I just got really sick of being like, what's wrong with me? And then realizing, oh, wait, this isn't a me thing. This is because our world is so rushed and we glorify the hustle. And so when I took a step back and really thought of building this manifestation system in a much more relaxed way, in a way that works in the cyclical nature and timeline of a month, that then can back into a year, right? Like you can back into your yearly and annual goals so easily. It almost was like, oh, like something just clicked. And I realized that I didn't have to fight upstream trying to get everything in as soon as possible. I was able to time things out seasonally when things felt right. I will create a list for myself at the top of every year of like maybe some goals in different categories. But listen, it's not all going to happen tomorrow. And so being able to kind of seasonally check in and be like, oh, guys, I've been doing this manifestation process for over a year and it has completely changed my life. And it's so funny because like sometimes, I don't know, like spring will roll around and I'll be like, yep, now it's time to do this. Like I'm ready for this, right? Instead of Jan 1, go, go, go. So I'm really, really excited about the fact that this leans into a much more lenient system. And listen, the best part about the monthly manifestation process is that if you had something on your list that didn't work and you didn't finalize it maybe that month, move it to the next. Like there's flexibility there and freedom there. And that was what was so enlightening to me, where I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to feel like I didn't check off every box. I get to build in when, how, and why I'm doing something. And guess what? There are plenty of times that I'll have something that like I've written down, whether it's on a manifestation list, whether it's on a pleasure practice list or a to-do list, where I'm like, because of this process, I've given myself the freedom to say, you know what? Maybe intuitively, ding, 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 this actually doesn't align anymore. I don't want this anymore. I thought I wanted it. I don't want it anymore. And that is okay, right? Like the glory and the beauty of the flexibility. So that's a little bit about how I created the journal, a bit of kind of the systems around it, what I felt like was so missing in the manifestation process. And I'm just really thrilled to be able to share this with you guys. And like I mentioned, the journal is now for sale, but if you are wanting to kind of dip your toes into this process as well, I highly urge for you to get the monthly manifestation, monthly archetype Notion template. So many of you have downloaded it and found it to work so beautifully for what you do. And it really inspired the entire creation of this journal. So you have options. You could also just listen to these episodes and kind of make this your own process, like put this down on paper yourself. So I'm just really excited to debunk it. Now, with that said, let's get into step 1 of our master manifestation class, which is visualization. This is my favorite part of the monthly manifestation process, mostly because I love visualizing. I love vision boarding. I've always been a super creative person, and I believe everybody is a very, very hyper creative person. You don't just have to work in the creative industry to be someone who is creative. And I want to debunk that process for all of us. So first off, I just want to like shout out the book that I've been reading, which is The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. I know this kind of got really popular sometime last year, but this book is phenomenal. And really, it's all about how we're all creative beings. And regardless of where you work, what you do, and what you're interested in, creativity shows up in everything. And we are all creative beings. And so I have been loving this book. It is so inspiring. And I feel like it goes hand in hand really with this entire visualization process. So to kind of take a step back, the reason why the visualization process is integral to manifesting is because we need to become the versions of ourselves that we see embodying basically our next level us. And what I mean by that is we want to step into the version of ourselves that feels worthy, that feels capable, that feels determined and excited and vibrant and ready to call in the desires and the manifestations that we are seeking. And so we basically want to match our frequency of what we're calling in with who we are, okay? Stick with me for a second. This is a Esther Hicks / Abraham Hicks explanation of really meeting your frequency where you're at and really aligning to your desires. So think of it almost like a radio station, right? Your manifestations are at channel 99.9, but you're at 89.9. How are you going to tune your station, change your station to match that frequency, or tune your tuner to match that same frequency? And so I think of the visualization process as really meeting yourself and matching yourself to where those manifestations and where those desires are. Now, we're already inherently worthy of what we're calling in to manifest, but what gets us there, what expedites us there to that timeline is by matching that frequency and allowing ourselves to step in and visualize who we are in the deservingness of it all, in the manifestation of it all. And it really takes the opportunity for you to look inward and have a moment of really reflecting on what it is energetically that you are calling in, that you are stepping into. Who is this version of you? He, she, they, them. Who are they? Who are they? I love this part of the process, just to like give you a glimpse into it. We'll get deeper into it. But I love this part of the process because every month I'm like, okay, who am I? Who am I stepping into that is going to allow me to align, which is part 2 of our conversation, to my manifestations? Who are they hanging out with? What are they doing? How are they spending their time? What are they wearing? How are they showing up? All of these things. How are they spending their mornings? How are they spending their evenings? What are they doing in the mundane? How are they prioritizing their well-being? How are they prioritizing their rest? And it really allows you to match the energy of what you're calling in. There are some seasons where I am moving really fast, where I am executing, where I am creating, and I allow myself to really match that version of myself. There are other times where I'm slowing down, where I'm getting quiet, where I'm resting, where my output is not necessary. It is all about my input. And it's all about asking myself, who am I needing to be right now to see, to believe that my desires are possible? Point, period, blank, the end. Who am I needing to be to see that my desires and manifestations and dreams are possible? Who am I needing to be? Who is that version of self? What do they look like? How are they showing up? What lights them up? What gives them energy? What drains energy from them, right? And so it's this entire visualization process. And when I say turning inward, I really mean having in practice of turning inward. This journal will take you through that. It will give you prompts and times and daily moments to turn inward and make this a practice. But listen, other ways of tuning inward, and I still do these practices in tandem with this monthly manifestation journal, is meditation, is journaling, is time alone, quiet, without your phone, in nature, moving meditations, voice memoing myself while on a walk, like taking a chance to ask myself, how am I? How am I doing? Really getting quiet. Because I think so much of us guys, this is so real. We look to so many other people online. We are inundated with information all the time that is very inspiring, don't get me wrong, but it's also many times people find themselves just mimicking or following the pack or doing something because, all the other girls are doing it, or, following the leader. And I think when you take time to tune inward and create your own intentional practices around that and ask yourself how you're doing, what do you need? What are the pleasure practices you need in your life? What are you visualizing? Who do you need to be to align to your manifestations? Those are all questions that you are asking yourself. You're not sourcing, you're not looking for information from others. You're not out there sourcing and mining for opinions, right? It's this practice of really, really tuning into our intuition. And so tuning inward is major. And it is going to be so integral to authentically do this. I know the word like authentic can be so overused, and so many of us are almost like, I sometimes tend to roll my eyes because I'm just like, oh yeah, here we go again. Like, how do we become our most authentic self? But it's true. How do we become our most authentic self? We tune down the noise and we tune up our frequency to match the frequency of our freaking desires. We tune down the outside noise. We tune up the inner noise to meet our freaking desires. Guys, I could scream this from the rooftops. Like, turn down the outside noise. Tune up what your system is saying to you. To you. And truthfully, that's when you're in your authenticity. That's it. You don't have to do anything else. you have to do anything else. Like that is when you are in the total flow and synchronicity of it all. And it is magical being there. I cannot explain, like, I feel like a whole new person. I'm like, there is a pre and post version of me. Same with when I went to the Eras tour. Okay. I was like, I was not really a Swiftie before. Now I'm like hardcore. And like, I feel like I literally changed my life. Like same with this monthly manifestation process. My life has totally changed because of it. And I want to scream it from the rooftops. I'm doing it right now. I'm screaming it from the rooftops. But yeah, who do I need to be? And doing so in like an unedited way. So I'll get into like the nitty gritty of my actual process. But when I say doing it in an unedited way, I really am referring back to the idea of like, stop looking so much to the people around you. Really allow yourself to journal this through, voice memo this through, meditate this through, and think around how you can drop in. Not to tease too much, but as part of this journal soon, we're going to be rolling out drop-ins, which are guided ways for you to actually do this. So if this feels almost like a little elusive and confusing, don't worry. I've already kind of thought of ways that we can really be here to guide you on this process and allow you the space to really tune inward. So I'm really excited to share that, but those won't be out for a couple of weeks. So again, podcast listeners only hear this. I'm not going to be blasting this out to anyone else, but I'm very excited. So the visualization process really starts with tuning inward. The second part is where we get to be so playful in our actual visual expression. So I'm someone who, as a teenager, would get like a million Vogues, teen Vogues, whatever I could like get from the library or like grab off of a supermarket magazine counter, and just like I would go ham in my childhood bedroom with glue and poster board and my scissors, and I would just collage. I would collage like crazy. And it's something that I feel like has always been a really big part of just my own creative expression. I know so many people used to do this as well when they were growing up, but I feel like as kind of the art of magazines has kind of dwindled, unfortunately, and we've entered more of this digital space, I found myself almost missing this. And when I rediscovered what my own kind of collaging and visualizing process was, it almost felt like I was like sealing in that inward feeling, what I was seeing and thinking inside, and I was able to visually express it on the outside so I could always be reminded of it. And that's why there's such an important emphasis on visualization in this process, because yes, the most important thing is to tune inward and connect to that authenticity, connect to that deep knowing and that deep intuition and that deep desire, but then to translate that into something visual and a visual expression, which we're all fully capable of. And you know, you don't have to innately like be someone who has always thought of themselves as crazy creative to be able to do this. I want to debunk that as well. Like I'm really excited to get people into the visualization process and show themselves really, oh my God, I had this within me the whole time. So what I'll do every single month is I will create a vision board for the month. That allows me to align to the visuals of really what my desires are and what I've been calling in for myself and what I really see for myself for that upcoming month. That also helps me end up eventually creating a word for the month, which we'll get to in part 2 of this series, the Manifestation Masterclass Align segment, which I'm very excited to get into. But today we're just talking about visualizing. So from that, every month, I will create a vision board, and I keep it pretty simple. I'll share my process with you guys, and I keep this free format because I want you guys to be able to really do this in a way that feels good to you. There's no prescription on how to visualize correctly, but I want to just share some ways that I do this so that you get inspired and that you might be able to do something similar for yourself. So at the top of every month, I lean into that feeling. I tune inward. I kind of just tap into like what I might be calling in, whether it's like seasonally, like let's use June for an example, where we're finally in summer. I'm feeling kind of the excitement of that time before spring, right before we really feel like we're in summer mode. I'm feeling just the excitement of all the blooms around me. Like everything feels like it's flourishing, whether it's like literally growing, whether that's more like metaphorically growing and like launching, creating this launching this journal, all those things, right? So I kind of tune into that and then I put it into a vision board. And I allow myself to really do this in a way that doesn't feel like it's pressured, that doesn't feel like it needs to be quote unquote perfect. So I'll share my process and then I'll give a couple other ideas for how you can do this. So I personally use Pinterest. I go to Pinterest every single month and I just create a new Pinterest board titled the name of the month. So June, for example. And I'll just go on my feed and I'll just start posting anything that stands out to me. I'll be like, oh, love that ocean picture. Oh, love that recipe. Oh, love that girl's outfit, right? And I'll just be like, pin, 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 and not think about it. And that's really like kind of the freedom and free format that I love so much about the Pinterest process and what I feel like kind of authentically lends itself to this manifestation process, which is like there's no method to the madness. It's just madness. So I'm pin, pin, pin. I really set up a nice vibe for myself. Sometimes I'm like chilling down here on the couch with like a nice cup of tea, just hanging out on a weekend day, just, taking time to really lean into the visuals and feelings that just resonate. And then afterwards, I'll be like, oh my gosh. And sometimes I'll be like, wow, this is really jiving. Other times I'll be pinning and I'll be like, oh my God, I don't know if this is going to look good or turn out any particular way. But every single time I click into that board, I always look at it and I'm like, wow, this is it. Sometimes it's a little mishmashy. Sometimes it looks really cohesive. I don't really care. It's just who I'm leaning into and what I'm leaning into. And so from there, I will either just have that board. You can kind of stop at step one, just have your Pinterest board. Sometimes I'll screenshot those photos. I'll set it as my phone background. I'm a big phone background girl. I'll show you right here on YouTube. This is actually a little collage I made. We'll get into that part. But I'm always about setting my phone background to my visuals for the month. It's just a constant reminder of what I'm, the bigger picture, right? Like what I'm working toward, to not be so stuck in the small details and always stay with that perspective, always have that bird's eye view toward what I'm working on, toward who I am, who I know I am, what actually matters, what values are actually like standing true to me and what I can let go of. It allows me to really just like let go of the bullshit. Sometimes like there'll be like little stressors in my life. I'm like, don't worry about that. That mood board every time I touch my phone reminds me of that. So there's the Pinterest process where you can kind of just create a board. Step two, if you're feeling like it, and I really encourage this, is that Pinterest actually has a collage feature. So if you click into your board, you can actually end up making a collage on their platform. So easy. It's so cool. And guess what? It's formatted to the size of your phone screen. So you can save that baddie to your photos, set it as your lock screen, and that's that. And you don't have to have Adobe Photoshop. You don't have to have Canva. You don't have to go to all these like crazy apps to collage. It's literally in the platform, which I love. By the way, this is not sponsored. Pinterest should 100% be sponsoring this, but they're not. I just authentically and truly love it. So yeah, I will set that phone background and have that really marinate and be a part of my visualizing process. If you're someone who is maybe like less online, get back to those magazines. Like have a great time. Go to, Barnes and Noble. I love their magazine section there. Go to the supermarket, go to the library. They always have free magazines at the library. I went to the library because we hosted a vision boarding event a couple months ago where we gathered all community together and we did this like live vision boarding event. By the way, we're going to be doing a lot more of those. Those were so much fun. But I got so many magazines going to the library and just going to the front and saying, hey, do you have any magazines like left over that you can give me from last month? And they gave me a whole stack. So I highly recommend just getting back to basics there if that feels like easier for you, a little bit more creative for you, and it doesn't need to be wild. I also know some people, there's a Bedside follower on here who made a story the other day and shared with me that she makes vision boards that are more like seasonal or not for every single month. So if it feels like a big pressure for you or something totally new, don't worry so much about it. But I just love that visualizing process. I think most importantly, to lean inward, ask yourself what you're needing, visualize whether that's physically or in your mind. Same thing. Who you are wanting to be, who you need to be to step into to match that frequency of what you're calling in, of what your desires are, is all you need to do. So you could even write this down if you're someone who's like, okay, I embodied it in a meditation. Now I'm going to just write it down. There's a whole free write section in the monthly manifestation journal, an entire section where it prompts you to collage or journal further or, get into more of that visualizing process. So do it in a way that works for you. But I do have to say, the Pinterest process is so much fun. I am pretty obsessed with it. And it's really fun to make mood boards. Also, a little teaser for the Bedside community. We're working on maybe making some collaging kits for you guys. So if this feels like a really big, daunting task for you, we're going to be creating a solution for that soon. Also, hopefully, just going to be able to share some like monthly wallpapers as well on our Instagram at the Bedside. And it's something that you can easily screenshot and download yourself if you are wanting to kind of lean into having more of a vision board created by us for the month. So anyways, that is really the master manifestation process and part one of our masterclass over here of how to actually manifest, right? And how to step into that, how to learn to visualize and tap into our intuition, tap into our desires, and really believe and know within us that we are deserving of matching that frequency. We're deserving of matching our manifestations and doing so with our hand in it, right? Like in this process, but also doing it where there's a part of us that allows the how to happen, right? We lean into really not gripping too tight to the outcome, to the process, having that loose framework, but being open to how it unfolds for us, which is the magic of it all, right? That's the difference between goal setting and manifesting. We're allowing ourselves to have the hand of our guides in there, to have the hand of the universe working its divine timelines and allowing us to match that version of self, our higher selves, meet our higher selves in the process of it all. So I am so excited to be delivering this to you guys. So head to thebedside.co, grab your journals, grab your Notion templates. I'm so excited to finally be able to say that you can get it because it's been a long time coming. And the coolest part is that every journal maps out exactly 4 months. So each journal is 4 months of archetypes, 4 months of pleasure practices, manifestations. There's master manifestation lists, pleasure practice lists in the back that you can keep track of and tether yourselves to. There's an entire upfront that basically explains in even more detail what I was explaining at the beginning about the intuition desire cycle, pleasure practices, archetypes, the visualize, align, attract system. There's like an entire novel up front, basically. And then it gets into 4 months of manifesting. And the coolest part is that you can actually get this journal on subscription. So you'll get it 3 times a year and make sure you get it every 4 months so that you can really delve into the system. You can also just buy one-off journals, but I was excited to gift you guys the option of subscribing because I know that's something that I would love to have myself and, not like forget or need to reorder something after the first time I did. So anyways, thank you guys for tuning in. I'm so excited to deliver this to you and stay tuned for next week because we'll be getting more into part 2 of our manifestation masterclass, which is all about aligning. So taking everything that you visualized and aligning that to your word, to your archetype, that then will allow us to attract. So stay tuned and thank you guys so much for listening. It's finally here. I'm just over the moon and I'll catch you guys next week. All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Bedside podcast. I hope you loved this episode as much as we did making it. If you have any feedback, questions, or suggestions for future episodes, or if you just want to chat, don't hesitate to reach out to us at The Bedside on Instagram and thebedside.co online. You can also find us at By the Bedside on TikTok. To stay updated on our latest episodes, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on your preferred platform. And if you found this episode valuable, I would so greatly appreciate if you could leave us a rating, a review, text it to a friend, share it to your Instagram stories. Let's get this message out there loud and clear. Until next time, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.